Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. And yes, I do mean all of them. If what I believe is true does happen, then we'll have no more superstitions. We'll have no more quote unquote religions. I do mean all of them. We'll just have the truth. Okay, guys. So we were talking before the show, and we're going to do something a little bit unusual. Steve and Mac are going to, as fairly but harshly, attack the position that I hold and see how well it stands to their idea of what is reasonable. So we were talking before the show about why I have accepted the reading frame, the context, the exegesis and eisegesis, and what I consider to be necessary extrapolation from the text that's indicated by the text, and why I think that is better than what I've heard in the past from other believers. And this is my basic answer, although I'd love to get into the detail of this. My basic answer is that other expressions that I've heard and reading frames that I've heard from the text require that the text is doing several things. It requires a description of the Trinity, which has logical problems. That is, the Trinity cannot be as Christians are describing it, or it doesn't make sense in reality. And the bottom line is we have to eventually claim that we can't really understand it. Whereas the way I see the Trinity, and in fact the entire lineage described, makes perfect sense in reality. It doesn't stretch our understanding of logic whatsoever, and is very, very actually intuitive from our own experience. Mm-hmm. There are Christians claiming that they understand the Bible. Well, I don't know how you could understand the Bible and yet not address certain parts of it whatsoever. How can I say I know everything there is about car maintenance except for changing the oil? Well, I just defeated my own statement. So I ask Christians, what do the seven thunders mean? They have no idea, even though it's in the Bible clearly, it's described in the Bible clearly, and it's answered in the Bible clearly. Within the reading frame I've adopted. I ask Christians to justify the 24 elders, and they come up with these arbitrary measurements, these arbitrary justifications for who the 24 elders are. Well, it's 12 of these guys, it's 12 of these other guys, maybe it's one of this other guy over here. We can't really tell, but we certainly can't justify them by their description, which is a perfect description of the rewards to Christ. The problem that they have cognitively is that it describes 24 Christs. Not a problem in the reading frame that I've adopted, because it's describing several earths in a row. Right. I also hear people quoting the book of Ezekiel. Now, the book of Ezekiel is extremely different from all of the rest of the Bible, which is why people like to quote it. It's right. Why Southern Baptists like to thump their fists on the book of Ezekiel and say, God's going to get you. But the truth of the matter is, the God in the book of Ezekiel is going to get you. He is out to get you. He is the one who claims to send the beast to the field after Israel, which is told to be Satan in the book of Revelation, the exact same quote. Yet Christians will deny that the book of Ezekiel is about Satan. Well, this is just very inconsistent within the Bible itself. There's the problem of suffering, where people have to say things like, I can't justify why suffering could be used for good, but it certainly must be good. And really, I can't fathom why God would think it was good. Whereas what I'm saying is that because there's multiple earths and there is this society called heaven, which is a utopian society, that some small, as it may be, small percentage of the human beings who ascend into that heaven must understand what suffering is, just to keep from the entire community from repeating those same sets of mistakes and allowing Satan into their lives. Which means, yes, angels would have will and would be subject to evil if they so chose it. And I could keep going like this, but I wanted to present a few things and trigger some things in the gentleman's mind. And Steve and Mac, you guys decide who wants to go first with this.
Can I go first, Mac? Because I have two things I want to bug Richard about.
Sure.
I just wanted to give a reminder that some of the people in our audience would like to ask questions. So could we leave a gap at the end of the show for audience questions? That's okay, Richard? Because it's probably you. Okay, great. The other thing is that you've said many times that you've adopted a reading frame, and I'm quite sure I know what you mean, but I could be wrong, and I'm sure other people in the audience are wondering about what that means. I assume it means an overall context to the Bible as a whole.
Yes.
And how to read it.
Okay, so a person is left of two positions. They can say that it's in the inerrant word of God, and thereby should be consistent, which is my stance. That there is a singular authorship, even though there may have been several writers, there's a singular idea authorship, which is why it can be coherent within itself. If you don't adopt that view and you say, well, this part of Luke or whatever doesn't really fit into my reading frame, thereby it's wrong and it doesn't belong there. Well, now you get to cherry pick which parts you like and which parts you don't. You have just written your own Bible. You might as well just write your own Bible if you're going to throw parts away. Okay? Go ahead.
Okay. A follow-up. What do you think about questions about the letters of Paul? Because I think there are 15 of them, but there are only 7 that are considered authentic.
Right. It's problems like that. Now I have to try to figure out if Paul is partially lie, if there's lies in the Bible. Now I have to try to figure out if something contains lies, is it a lie altogether? Well, the answer would be yes, it would be. But I don't find Paul or anyone else disagreeing with anything within the reading frame that I've adopted. And you asked me to qualify adopted, and I would. What I mean is, I actually had a waking dream. That's the only way I know to put it without sounding all spooky. I had a waking dream that taught me things that I was actually unaware of and could not have been aware of. But it contained real and true information, which was falsifiable in reality, and it stood to be true. That is, I looked for it, it was actually there, things I didn't know existed. So because it was valid in reality and contained actual information, and since I personally, not everyone has to, but I do personally value the what I think is a fact statement, that information is habitually associated to conscious mind, and yet it was not my mind that generated this information, me being unaware of it. I had to consider the idea that this could have been from someone else's mind, as if they were telling me a movie. And that's the way it went. Some other being told me a movie which benefit me and give me a reading frame for the entirety of religions. And I do mean all of them, which is shocking. And the context that I'm putting toward the Bible doesn't work on only the Bible. It works in Hinduism, Native American, Aboriginal Australian. I mean, all the ancient religions that believe or profess a progenitor first being or a progenitor first set of beings. This reading frame works for all those religions. Now that's freaky, because I didn't even know those religions, and I'm still learning what religions exist. I certainly didn't know Native American Zuni. I mean, look at me. I'm just white as you come. And I didn't mean that as a pun, but it kind of. But anyway, never mind that.
I can confirm that Richard is in fact white.
Yeah, I'm pretty darn white. So I wasn't familiar with all these expressions. I really, truly wasn't. And I wasn't trying to find a way to justify a reading frame that would work for all of these things. Like, who the hell could even do that? But it was handed me, and because it works, and I have no way to disprove it yet, I still accept it.
Over to you, Mac.
Okay, so if I could kind of take a step back and take a bird's eye view of of what I see to be the situation here, we have, you know, what Richard's presenting is a coherent view of not just the Bible, but of mythology in general, something that ties together all of ancient mythos in a way that Jung would be salivating over, right? So we're this is beyond collective consciousness and down to like a common origin story that we all share, or that is transmitted to us collectively, depending on how you want to appreciate it. So the problem that I see is that there are other claimants to this. There are other people who say we can tie together all of the ancient myths. We can say this is the central truth through everything, and it is this, or it is this. Something that occurred to me today is the author John Allegro and the book The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. I don't know if you guys have any familiarity with that, but this guy was a translator on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so he was a linguist, and his specialty was linguistics and translating Hebrew specifically. And he found in the Hebrew scripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls, he found all these supposed instances of referencing the Amanita muscaria mushroom specifically. And so, the shorthand for his theory is that Jesus was a mushroom, psychedelic mushroom. And then he expanded this idea into Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and Hinduism, and said, we can find references to this mushroom in all of these ancient ideas, and this is the secret, the central secret of spirituality. And of course, the self-referential proof of that is that upon ingestion in the right set and setting of this plant or mushroom, we have something like a spiritual experience. So here's another example of a coherent, logically, inherently coherent worldview based on ancient scripture, which, frankly, I don't buy.
Actually, that's not coherent. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Part of the qualifier, unless you're misquoting the gentleman, which I doubt you would purposefully do, you
Definitely
might be doing
not.
it by accident. Let me give you a chance to retract something.
Okay.
Because I thought I heard you say that it had to be the right situation and the right mindset and the right person. Is that an idea that I misunderstand something?
No, I use the phrase set and setting, but that's what that means. Yes.
Okay, why?
The right everything.
Because if it has to be the right person, then you just cherry picked your control group. You just ruined the experiment right there. If it has to be a certain setting instead of could be any setting, then you're talking about framing the idea before the person even participates. Now that's another problem. That's not scientific at all. And if it takes a certain person in that certain frame, in that certain setting to do it, well, then you can say, well, the reason you didn't succeed is A, B, and C, and it's all your fault, and it's not the fault of the mushroom at all. This gives extra power to the mushroom that it doesn't necessarily have.
Right. I guess I was trying to reflect the claim of John Allegro, and I should retract it and refine it, I guess. So his claim specifically was that the use of this specific mushroom was ritualistic and used within the confines of specific ritual context, and so it would be someone that was chosen as ready for the experience. And then that person would have been put into a context, a setting that would be generative for the spiritual experience. If what you're saying is that's not the definition of Christ, I have to agree with that. As a Christian, Christ does not. Christ is for everyone. The redemption is for everyone. It's not a specific person at a specific time. But I'm not sure if that's what you're objecting to.
Well, there's certainly parts of the brain that can be, I don't know, let's put it this way. Some people have a log stuck up their butt, and
Sure.
they need that log removed. And I get that. And ayahuasca and lots of other, this mushroom you mentioned, that a name I don't know, I'm sure it does that for them for a short amount of time. Okay. But you can force people into spiritual-like experiences where they claim to have lost self, experienced God in a very, very personal way, just through electromagnetic waves in a halo around their head.
That's right.
So I'm not certain that we're talking about anything other than brain function there.
Right.
And you can say, oh, I experienced Jesus or I experienced God. Hey, that's fine. I'm happy that you had that experience. If that changes your life in some positive way, improves your relationships, makes you more loving, more accepting, more humble, I'm happy for you. Did you actually experience God? Well, that's a good question. I'd like to ask anyone who went under this what information they gained that would change the human race for the better. Because that would be the sort of thing Jesus would be interested in. He wouldn't be interested in getting you a car.
Right.
Well, I seem to remember Jesus telling the apostles, you get a car, you get a car, everybody gets a car.
Are you sure?
Well, they were of one accord. I know that.
Beautiful.
I applaud you, sir.
You set him up, I'll knock him down. Keep going.
He is indeed a father.
Wow.
Okay. So that follows that what your claims are, Richard, are not confined to the realm without. Well, can be demonstrated as contributing to human well-being, humanity's well-being
as a whole, not to the individual.
Right.
Quite frankly, I was sold by the time that I discovered there were moons over Jupiter that I didn't know existed.
Sure.
That were within this dream sea. I just didn't know they existed.
That would have convinced me too.
Never mind that it has the colors right, and that people couldn't have known it at the time.
Right.
And the chemical reaction, the chain of chemical reactions would work in reality. That would actually happen. I was sold. Right. I didn't need more than just David and Goliath. I was already good. I was sure human beings could not have written it at the time. Okay? And that some other intelligence must have written it. We can discuss who those intelligence might have been, because there's possibilities there. And I would get into war tactics and vested interest on emotional levels and things like that. But I was already sold. I didn't need more than that. But that gave context to the book of Revelation, which explained all of the Bible and explained all of the religions, every one I've ever looked into. Okay? So I'm extremely persuaded by that. So if I have more than I needed, what is it for?
Right.
Okay. So I would default back to my standard statement. If I'm telling just a weird, interesting story that people like or don't like, depending on the person, then that's one thing, but it's really harmless. However, if Christians are that would be right. But if Christians are wrong and heaven is a real thing that shows up to this earth as described by the text, and they're expecting to just pop out of existence into some other, I don't know, universe within the cosmos or some other crap. I don't know what they're talking about. It makes no sense in reality. We know of no other planes of existence other than this one. There, as far as I know, there's no such thing. And if that's what they're expecting, but what shows up instead is the heaven described in the Bible, then they got problems. If I can help in the smallest way, just by this icon behind me, if I can just show them the icon and say, look, heaven is 29 spherical red spaceships that are moon and planet-sized objects with decorations of an eagle, a lion, a calf, and a man's face on 4 parts of them. I've already helped so freaking much, it's just crazy. Just by doing that, So that's how I feel about it. But let's talk. Go ahead. Oh,
I was just trying to fill the science, but if you have somewhere to lead us, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, so we've gone from the subject of reading frame to the concept of heaven arriving on Earth. Would you say that was heaven coming to Earth rather than heaven on Earth?
Oh, there is no heaven on Earth. That's not described anywhere. What you'd likely be referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong in the least or exaggerating in any way, is is the millennial reign, is how some Christians say it, where they think Earth is perfected during the reign of Christ, and there's some other 1,000-year test, and and then there's heaven. Then there's perfection after that. Okay, so I'll tell you exactly where they're getting that from, and it's not hard to justify. First, I'd like to point out that if there's a test after this for 1,000 years, where Satan tempts people, I thought Satan was already tempting people. And then I thought God came and took ruling over it, according to the Bible. But then somehow, even though he takes ruling, he loses it again. I don't know who this wimpy God is that they're describing, but certainly Satan is more powerful than whatever God they're describing, which makes no sense to me.
Right.
But then Satan's in charge of the earth for that time. And then he's struck down and killed by Michael and his crew, and then is peace. Doesn't that just sound like the Old Testament? Doesn't that just sound like what we're doing right now? Could it be that it just told the story twice? Because if it told the story twice, that would justify a new heaven and a new earth. That God used these invisible things to create the worlds. That if there's 24 elders, there's been 23 past earths, and there'll be one to follow this one, which explains why angels do all those things, and what we do as angels when we're perfected is we continue this cycle. So, like it talks about the death and reincarnation of Satan in the Bible, it talks about him being literally killed, as a physical being literally killed and then resurrected by his own kind. But Christians can't accept that the Bible is describing reincarnation of Satan. So instead, they've made up this extremely elaborate, doesn't make any sense, their God reigns supreme yet is defeated, 1,000-year millennial reign thing, when all it's talking about is just a brief synopsis of the next earth.
Well, it's a bit overwhelming when you talk of the next heaven or the next earth. But I wouldn't say you were wrong. After all, also with the Book of Revelations, when I read it, I just found it mind blowing, but I didn't presume to understand it. But you seem to be able to make more sense out of it, might it?
Well, I think it's very, very straightforward in that it keeps with the overall theme of the Bible, and that it makes sense in reality within the reading frame I've adopted. It's okay. Here's how the Book of Revelation goes in just plain English. From so far out of our solar system that we literally can't see it, they launch a chemical composite of a pretty good sized mass, holding a immense electrical charge. The sun and its gravitational pull naturally pulls this. They shoot it in a very, very specific direction. The sun pulls this thing toward itself, causing it to curve, and it's frozen together. So the sun defrosts it and activates it. And then 5 parts of that and the electrical discharge defeat the gravity of Mercury, knock the planet Mercury off course, and 1 chunk of 6 does not hit the planet Mercury. This starts a chain of events that we will see if you have a fairly decent telescope, or probably even a pretty cheap one, and in a series of events that happen in our solar system, ending with the ignition of Jupiter, which you would be able to see with your normal eyes. You can see it unlit right now in the night sky through much of the year. So. And then you have a description of all the repercussions of that series of events, and those are called the announcing miracles. And there's 7 of those. I'm going to skip over that part. And then you have heaven arriving. And everything that's described in this is all physical things, not spiritual things, that people will see with their own normal senses. You don't even need enhanced senses to see most of this stuff. Because it's the evil nation that needs a sign. It's the non-believer who needs proof. It's not for the believer. If a believer saw the signs of end times, they'd go, yep, I was right.
Right.
That didn't make them a believer. But on the flip side of that same coin, if God is just doing it to show off, well, he's showing off. If he's doing it just to be mean and to punish people and not correct them, well, then he's a tyrant. How moral is that? So Christians look at God as a tyrant who's justified because of his own personal righteousness, which is apparently justified within himself, which is circular reasoning. It makes no sense at all. Whereas what I see the text describing is a series of events that will cause us to accept the new paradigm, the new truth, and is talking about inviting us in a very friendly but not too very gentle way to join them in their established utopian galactic society. That's what I see being described. So we're going to get to your questions. JG, ask as many as you like. So you know, with that kind of realism and plausibility in the physical realm, I don't see why I should even really seriously entertain something that doesn't meet those standards. I mean, would it make sense at all if I say, well, let me just ask a Christian, Mac, you're fairly familiar with the Bible. How did Jesus defeat physics to walk on water?
How?
Yeah, how?
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe Jesus was hydrophobic.
Maybe the calluses on his feet were hydrophobic to the extreme and propulsed him forward and upward, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem reasonable. I don't know of calluses that are that hydrophobic.
I was just going with the science I know.
He was a super calloused, fragile mystic.
I love that joke, by the way. I know that whole joke. I love that. Do you know that joke?
I've never heard
that joke.
No, tell me the joke in its regular form.
What's the guy's actual name?
It's about Gandhi, really.
Gandhi. Yeah. Gandhi was known for a few things. He didn't like wearing shoes, so the underside of his feet became very tough. He also wasn't big on like body hygiene. He didn't brush his teeth much. He fasted a lot, and that made him skinny and weak. But he was a very, very, very religious guy. But of course, you know, all of this made him not smell so great, and he had bad breath, which made him a super calloused, fragile mystic with a case of halitosis.
Oh my God! Oh. That's
super callous, fragile mystic, case of halitosis. It's hard to do. That's really hard to do, but.
I wanted to know what you thought of the rapture. I know that, of course, Catholics don't really regard the rapture the way Protestants do. And then I heard N.T. Wright dismissing the rapture as just sort of a flight of fancy among some Protestants. Okay.
What's described in the text that I see is spaceships arriving to the Earth full of what I could call loosely fully evolved humans. They're just human beings, but they've got social standards that they consider the most important thing, which they call God. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what they're inviting us to do is join that established society. Now, I don't know how to describe spaceships 3,000 years ago and fully ascended and fully perfected human beings 3,000 years ago as not God. There's no way you could like represent them those idea sets without them worshiping it. They would just worship it. They wouldn't be able to understand it in some other way because they haven't even made a bicycle yet. Okay. Never mind rocket ships and things that can hover in the air and stuff like that. But plainly, it describes machines several times, things that don't have to sleep, things that can hover in the air, all these machine qualities that aren't living animal qualities whatsoever. So Ascension or Rapture, which the word Rapture is not in the Bible, just in case somebody thought it was. The ascension into heaven is us being literally physically taken up into this set of craft called heaven. Some parts of the story called Noah's Ark. Some parts of the story called Seraphim. Some parts of the story called heaven. It just depends on which section you're reading. So it's talking about us being physically carried. Now, whether that's like small transport vehicles that maybe carry only 10,000 people at a time, or whether angels outnumbering us at least 23 to 1. In fact, it should be 230 to 1, actually, if every population of every Earth turns out to be what this population has been, and a great percentage of them, the greatest percentage of them, are recovered into their heaven, then they would outnumber us by well over 100 to 1, more than 200 to 1, actually. If we each get an individual flight where an angel like literally flaps his wings and carries you up there, I don't know. I don't know how you actually get there. But it does go into great detail that like, for instance, the word Jordan means the place of descending. That's what Jordan means. And then when you look at all the ways Jordan is used, it makes perfect sense that you'd have to cross the river Jordan in order to go to heaven, because Jordan outlines the place where they descend onto the earth. And I mean, it's so incredibly repetitive. I don't know if that really answered to you. The idea of rapture, where you disappear off the planet without warning, is, I don't know, not biblical, anti-biblical. I'll say it's anti-biblical, where what's described is one person will be left behind and another one will be taken.
Right.
But that doesn't involve anything supernatural whatsoever. What it means is you have a choice. You can choose. You can say, okay, I believe these aliens are just advanced humans, and I'm cool. You can say, I think this is a biological meant to come here to harvest the planet, and they're going to eat us. That's your decision. Fine. Now, there's going to be 7 years of convincing for you and 3.5 really rough years if you stay. But the whole idea is to persuade you into the new paradigm. So people will have choice. There's no defeat of free will anywhere in this. If you choose to stay to the very end, when they remove the oceans and the crust melts, guess what? A human can't handle that. You're going to die the death.
Did you say, sorry, that a human can't handle it being taken up into heaven?
No. I said the melting of the crust. A human being can't handle standing in lava.
No, they can't.
So the lake of fire would literally kill you, which is exactly what the book says.
I was worried I spoke over Mac there. Can I shut up for a bit and let Mac take the wheel?
I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking a lot of things. I'm wondering yeah, that was a great one from People Through I'm thinking, why so harsh? Why so insistent? Why?
About what?
Why make the disbelievers stand in lava? Or is that a natural consequence? Is that not something?
Well, first of all, it's the absolutely last event. Okay.
Okay.
The second thing that I would note about, I can hear really heavy breathing through your mic, Steve.
Oh, let me adjust it. Sorry.
Whose name is not Mike Steve, but anyway. It's the very, very last event, and at the last event, most repent. So more than 50%, whatever that means. I can't tell what most mean.
Okay.
But more than 50% change their minds about the situation due to that event. Now, the other less than 50% whatever that is, who decide to stay behind are going to watch the earth collapse around them and melt into lava. Because without the oceans, that's just what would naturally happen. Okay. So they're talking about the physical removal of the oceans causing the mountains to melt like wax. Okay? Which is where you get the thousands times thousands of horsemen whose horses have the head and the mouth of a lion emitting smoke and fire, and they have tails like serpents whose tails also do harm. That is lion's mouth, smoke and fire, snake tails, or a volcano. So thousands times thousands of volcanoes, which is realistic. That's what would actually happen. Sure. But the human body, of course, can't stand in a lava flow, so you would die. Now, that's a horrible, horrible death. But there's something interesting about the human brain. If you suffer something horrible enough, your brain will reset. And you'll actually not remember something. If it's horrible enough, your brain will reset. You won't be able to remember it.
But if you're consumed in lava, there's no brain.
There is no brain there. That's correct. But the text describes something, not a soul, but a spirit, which is the intrinsic human being itself, which has nothing to do with flesh. So I see that as the absolute most stubborn cannot accept it after 7 years of proofs. Stay for that event, and God hits a reset button on their spirit. Now, why would he bother to hit a reset button? Now, that's an interesting question. But then it describes, and it seems true in reality, there are people who claim to have been reincarnated, which are liars. But there are some cases, seldom, very, very infrequent, that seem to have information that they cannot have from their life experience and recall other lives and have great detail about it and are able to recite intimate details and personal feelings about certain things. And then when those details are investigated, the things actually exist. There was the case of a boy who was about 3.5, 4 years old when he started telling his parents that they're not his parents. He started telling his siblings that they're not his siblings. He started at a very tender age describing a family and a house and a certain beach and the names of streets and I mean, like, details. They found the house, which did fit the description he gave. There was a family there that did have the names he recited. It was on the coast of Germany. But he hadn't been to Germany, and you can't read details like that unless you looked up the city records and you started to look into, like, I don't know, how could you find out? He knew where the bathroom was in the house. He knew where the kid's bedroom was, where the parents' bedroom was, without entering the building. So either an intelligent who did know these things was feeding this information, or he had this experience. Now, it's hard to decide that.
Well, I know in India, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I know that in places where the belief in reincarnation is common, you're much more likely to have accounts like these. So I was curious to hear that this happened in Germany and not India, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, it happened to an American child.
The American child was describing Germany, a past life in Germany. I'm familiar with that story too. The thing about Hindu and Indian and Tibetan cultures specifically is that they make room for reincarnation. Like they have conventions in place for exploring the connection to your past life, at least in specific circumstances. So, like the search for the next Dalai Lama has to do with a recognition of certain artifacts from the previous Dalai Lama's life, or in Hinduism, they often will expose a baby to certain symbolic toys that will indicate where they were from before. So but we don't have anything like that in the West, so it would make sense that there would be less instances and less reports of actual reincarnation memories, or those memories being taken seriously and investigated to the point where they could be somewhat supported.
I personally can't tell the difference between someone had an experience and someone was told an experience. When they tell me about it, I can't tell the difference there.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm not willing to commit to either side of it. I'm sitting on the fence on that one. I suppose we'll know eventually. But I love Welcome Moon Medi, whom I've never seen here before under this name. And I love this statement. Everything that I am stating right now is false. Love that. That's big fun. Okay, but I want to get back to comparing what I've accepted versus what Christians have accepted. I would ask you, Mac, where did all the water of the flood go?
I will be right back. Sorry.
No problem. I don't believe in a literal flood or anything, and my latest mentations on the flood story have been an attempt at seeing it through your reading frame. So when I think of waters, I think of population.
Try to steelman the Christian position then. I'm not asking you to believe it, but if you would steelman the Christian position on that.
I mean, there's two ways to look at it then. The creationist Christian position is that the water drained back into where it came from, or possibly that it ascended into the firmament. Both of those seem absurd to me. The sort of symbolical Christian would say that the waters represented extreme hardship and extreme messaging from God that certain behavior was not acceptable. And so the waters are still with us, if that is the case. The message is still with us that kind of behavior is not tolerated by God. The wickedness on the earth.
So my stance is that we are the flood. And because of that, it's talking about a population increase. That is, God brought a flood onto the earth. Being the father of all, that's totally true. And that the flood does destroy the planet. That is, we're destroying it right now. Go look into environmental problems. We are destroying the planet, no doubt about that. That it takes no extra H2O, and that it didn't have to recede or come from anywhere. Here's an interesting little note. The Bible in English reads, "The fountains of the deep burst open." And I find it quite biased that Christians will look into certain words that support their case, but they won't look into certain words from the Bible that don't support their case. And that's called cherry picking, or the sharpshooter fallacy. So they don't look into the intent, the etymology of these words that appear in the English text. For instance, the word fountain there. The word fountain does not mean a spring of water coming up out of the ground. It's not what you'd think it would, but it doesn't mean that. It actually means an eye-shaped thing in the landscape. Well, fountains are not eye-shaped. Natural springs don't look like eyeballs at all in any way. They're not shaped that way in any fashion.
No.
But if the word waters means people, then I can think of a place that people come from, which is an eye-shaped recessed hole in the landscape. And everybody already has a picture of that in their head. And yeah, it's pretty accurate that it's kind of eye-shaped, especially during a birthing process.
Yeah.
Or several other times. In other words, even in creation of pregnancies, it's eye-shaped. But so it is definitely that you could read the fountains of the deep burst open, and the waters came forth as an increase in population, which would be true. And that if it's true that our connection to spirits is a heavenly thing, then the windows of heaven were opened simultaneously. That makes perfect sense. And there's no need for a change in the amount of water here on this earth that's significant in any way. And we could talk about star water and all these other theories, but there's no need to change the amount of water. And I've heard Christians go so far as to say, well, the earth was a lot flatter then.
Right.
The sea basins weren't so deep. Crustal plate movement doesn't really work like that. There has to be this balancing act. And water will tend toward the low areas. So that's downward pressure, and it's hard to defeat that downward pressure. It's hard to push that sea floor upward.
Right.
In the amount of time that they're talking about, like something around 6,000 years. It simply can't be accomplished without causing huge water rush over land masses and wiping out entire populations of land masses. You just can't do it. So there's a lot of things in the Bible. What would the average Christian say is an explanation of water into wine?
God magic.
Basically, yeah, they're going to say God magic.
The church, by the way, the Catholic Church and the various popes really, really hate it, the concept of God as magician, but they can't really get around the fact that God seems to be a magical creature. He speaks things into existence, you know.
JG has another joke for you guys.
Nice.
I see.
That's
why the word's it's diagnosis.
Yeah.
That's really good, actually.
I like that. Thank you, JG.
If I could just submit maybe a little bit less farcical common Christian understanding the water to wine. The restaurant that I work at puts a lot of emphasis on that miracle as sort of a foundational ethic. And the idea is that in that time context, a wedding wouldn't have been proper without wine. And so this was a movement of hospitality and warmth from Jesus in a time where hospitality was the needed component. And it wasn't available because there wasn't any wine. And so it was sort of what do we do? Hospitality is so important, but we can't extend it right now. We need a miracle. And so the miracle wasn't an alcoholic beverage, but rather this idea of love and compassion and hospitality. And so, there's symbolism at play there as well that I think, I mean, I don't know whether it means to say that or not, but to your question of what the average Christian thinks of when they hear that story, I think that definitely should be in the consideration.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you explain within that? Can you explain within that why he first refused?
No, I can't.
Just that's all we got is no.
Sorry, I could try, but it wouldn't be sincere.
It's because his mom was asking him, and he said, "Woman, what is it?" Which seems very rude, at least to our ears. Woman, what is it? I think the miracle is called the miracle at the wedding of Cana.
That's right.
I've got that asked backwards. But I'm not sure why he refused, other than being a guy who didn't want to have to do stuff. But
he actually says why.
He does?
He actually says why. He says it is not yet my time.
And isn't there an important thing said? Thou hast saved the best wine until last.
Yeah.
So here's how I would justify the water into wine and what it actually means, and that it involves nothing supernatural whatsoever, except new information, which is not supernatural. Jesus is called the first begotten of the dead, but the phrase "the dead" means those who will die. That is to say, non-believers. So then Jesus starts out by being elevated out of the group that are non-believers, i.e. Jesus himself was a non-believer or atheist. It's called an atheist. Okay. Right. Now being an atheist and then becoming the job Jesus Christ is a big change. Obviously. How could that change ever begin? How could that change ever begin? Well, God has to, according to the Bible, God has to act on the person. The person can't do it themselves. All right. So his mother comes to him and says, "We're out of wine." He says, "What is it, woman? It is not yet my time." So that's indicating a difference between when it is his time and is not his time. That is to say, a change. Okay? So there's a change in Jesus. And what does Jesus change? Well, what Jesus changes is the perception that the people, the populace of the world, have about the religious story. That's what he changes, which is why he's constantly saying, "You have heard, but I say," etc.
Right.
He's constantly saying that, correcting the old view of the texts. So what is water into wine? Well, first, what's water? Water is a necessity that is flavorless and colorless, although we need it. Okay? What is wine? A wine is not a necessity, it's a luxury. If you drink wine, it is colorful and it is pungent. And it has alcohol in it. It has the ability to make you drunken. Okay. So what Jesus is saying there, or what the Bible is saying there about Jesus, is he took water and turned it into wine. He took something of a necessity, but of no real effect, that is flavorless, colorless. I mean, it feels wet, whatever the heck that means. And he turned it into something pungent and colorful and something that is intoxicating.
Well, remember there, Richard, that it would have been dangerous just to drink water in that time. Wine was healthy for you because the alcohol meant it wasn't filled with all this pond scum that you would get from any amount of water. So I don't think they had any concept of boiled water, although I could be wrong.
Boiling water for purifying it? I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's something I would have to. We can come up with 1,000 justifications, perhaps, of why it would be a good idea to turn water into wine. Why it would be polite. Why it would be more hygienic. Why some people don't drink their well water at all and can't, or their natural groundwater, and why they can't because of bacterium and all kinds of things that will just. Well, you'll regret it if you drink it. By the way, if you ever go to a foreign country and they give you really, really hot peppers that you didn't ask for with your meal, eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's saving you. Because the peppers, the chemicals in the peppers will actually kill the bacterium that would otherwise give you a very, very bad case of, well, things you won't like.
I understand. Thank you.
So I think the miracle, and it is a miracle by definition, of what happens with Jesus is he was a non-believer who becomes a believer, and then it's his job to essentially fix people's idea of what the text, their own religious story is trying to tell them. Thus, water into wine. By the way, the definition of wine there doesn't fit wine, but it does talk about the ability of people to become drunk. And it's more centered on people becoming highly affected by it than it actually being a drink at all.
Interesting.
I know that I've said it before, thou hast saved the best wine until last. And I think it fits in well with the New Testament, the last shall be first, because in those times, you would have served the best wine at first. And as people became more drunk, you would serve the less quality wine because they wouldn't be able to tell.
Isn't that still true?
Yes, but of course Christ served the best wine last, which fits into this whole notion of the meek shall inherit the earth, The last shall be first, etc., etc.
That should read dirt.
Oh, can you fill that out for me there, Richard?
The meek shall inherit the dirt, actually,
not
the planet.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound so cool.
Well, maybe I think that sounds pretty cool. If I'm a simple person who likes a simple life, and I want to be a farmer in heaven rather than, I don't know, a mechanical engineer working in the engine room, what's wrong with me being a farmer?
I guess, but it just it lacks a certain zest.
It does.
Just, hey, we've got some dirt over here for you. You'll love it.
Well, that's literally what the word earth means, is soil.
Yes,
and if you talk about all the soil, it's the planet Earth. But if you talk about only some of the soil, then it's dirt. But that's literally what the word earth means.
Oh, Be No Just Be has logged in.
Nice.
How you doing, sis?
Hey.
Peebo Thulu. Although I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, I do not know the answer to your question how the hot peppers are supposed to help. It's simply what I've heard from. I live on the border of Mexico. I know a lot of Mexican people. They recite this to me. I never looked into it. I just thought it was kind of cute and funny. It may be actually true.
Maybe it's just a joke to make gringos
sweat
red.
Maybe so.
I once got a girlfriend to suck a lemon while we were at dinner. It was my birthday. And she said, "Oh, geez, I've got something caught in my throat." And I realized I had a rare opportunity. You see, in the olden days, they would have sliced lemons served with fish. And they had this stupid idea in their heads that lemon could dissolve fish bones. Of course, any test would show this wasn't true. But that's what they believed. So my girlfriend says, "Oh, geez, I feel like I got something." And I said, "Oh, well, it's too bad because lemon really works for that. You see, it constricts your throat, and because it's astringent, and it dislodges whatever's in there. Oh, look, there's some lemon." And I actually got her to suck lemons. And this is someone whose IQ I estimate to be over 180, much higher than mine. But I'm really glad
they're easier to take advantage of.
Yes. Well, anyway, I seem to be single, so there could be an explanation for that. But anyway, sorry, a stupid story. It doesn't have anything to do with tonight's topic. But
AK, I've actually thought about this quite a bit. It describes the Garden of Eden as all of the earth by necessity, and then it says Adam and Eve leave the Garden of Eden, and Adam has to get a real job. And you think, well, I don't want to work forever. I don't know. Would you want to be retired forever? I think I'd rather work. I'd rather have something productive to do where I felt like I was adding to, or at least not harming the community. I wasn't just a drain on the community. And after all, if there's no such thing as people fully, perfectly healed, having any kind of a birth defect or disability, then everyone's like perfectly healthy forever. I would want to be productive, actually. In fact, I know that most people who go into retirement resent not being able to do what they used to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if having work in heaven is such a bad idea. Actually, you may not share my opinion.
I think it's not just being productive. I think it's just being busy. I think people, like, the natural state that we find ourselves in is a state of activity, and we can call that work. But if you try, you can feel it draining you if you try to be sentient just sitting, not sentient, but if you try to be sedentary for too long. Like if you try to sit on a plane for 8 hours, you're going to be desperate to get up and move around. I've thought a lot about that too, Richard. And and earlier I will step up and say I'm one of these guys that loves dirt. I have a huge garden. I think about dirt all the time. I think about how to encourage it to be rich and life, full of life, and how to support my plants with the dirt. I don't mind, and I'll inherit the earth. You guys can take whatever else. I'll take the earth. That's fine. I don't know if I'm meek or not, but I hope I'm meek enough to inherit the earth, because I'll do the farming. That's fine.
Don't the Mormons have an idea that they will become eventually gods of their own earths, their own planets?
Ooh, that's a great one. I love this one. The Bible definitely promises you, if you take it for what it actually reads, it does promise the reader you essentially become God.
Really?
It does. Oh, absolutely, it does. The
Where is
problem
that?
is, it's kind of throughout the work. I mean, you could read the end, all the letters of the churches of Asia, where the one who overcomes is promised greater and greater promises in consecutive order. Where the first promise is you'll definitely go to heaven. That's the first promise. And then the second promise is, and you'll sit at my right side. And the third promise is, you'll be given the new name of God. And the fourth promise, and it just keeps going like that, and they get big, okay?
Right.
But the reader is promised those things. My question is, who's the reader? Is it anyone who happens to pick it up and read it? Well, if it's true that it's anyone who picks it up and read it, then no Christian should ever have dashed their foot against a stone.
Right.
Which is just obviously not true. That's a ridiculous promise to have such a hedge of protection around someone, that angels care for them night and day, that they could never be hurt accidentally. They're not going to get a disease. If a snake bites them, they're not going to be poisoned by it. They can literally drink arsenic and it's not going to hurt them. And yes, those promises are actually made. The question is, to whom?
Certainly not to me, because I don't believe a word of it. And there's a lot in the Bible.
Would it be reasonable if Christ had to be preserved for the crucifixion? Would that be reasonable?
Sorry, reasonable if Christ had what?
If Christ needed to be preserved, would that be consistent with the Bible? If Christ needed preserved for the cross?
Well, I guess he had to be. Because I don't believe in it, I don't know if Christ had to be preserved for the cross.
What if he died some other way?
Fine with me. I don't get a say in these things.
No, that's not what I mean. Is it consistent within the text that Christ has to be preserved for the crucifixion?
Yes, I guess so.
Okay, because then it won't work. If he dies before that, that's not going to work out.
Yeah, well, you can't have him being crucified by Pontius Pilate if he's already dead. I mean...
Yeah, that would be an issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's promising the reader that they get perfectly preserved for a certain event.
All right.
Christians read it and go, look, God loves me so much, he's going to take care of me no matter what. And then it doesn't work out. Then they lose their faith because their kid dies, or their husband dies, or they get poor, or a
snake handler gets bit.
A snake handler gets bit and loses part of his arm or his life. And then they're disappointed if people lose their faith. These promises were never made to them. Never were. Any more than every person could carry the new name of God. And every person could have the new heaven named after them. How many names does it got? 144,000 different names for the new heaven? Well, that's not even take you, a really long time to recite the name of heaven.
Yes.
So Christians have these inconsistencies they really don't want to address. Where what I'm saying is the demands and promises, other than the general populace demands and promises, which are really vague actually, and not promising or asking very much at all, are the rest of the promises that are well defined and make big promises and big demands, really big demands, that you be perfect before God. What?
Right.
The Bible already told you that none are perfect before God. Now it says be perfect before God. Well, who's going to do that? Well, one, and only one.
Hey, should we switch over let's see what time it is. Should we switch over to questions from the audience?
We don't have very many, guys. If you want to generate some questions, I would greatly appreciate it. And please, for this segment, and I appreciate humor. You can tell I appreciate humor. But for this, let's be serious. Really think about your question. Use all 200 spaces. And tag me in it to be sure that I see it. I saved some questions here. Two from Peebo Thulu and one from JG, so that you guys don't need to rewrite these if you're still around. But if you have other questions, please think of them and write them now. Those 3 questions were the following. Which native Australian religion, by Peebo Thulu? JG, what is evil? And Peebo Thulu again, electricity isn't the right thing to do that. And I understand the questions. I don't need you to expound on them, although I would have liked them to have been longer, just so I can be sure I understand your context, because context is king. But to answer those 3 questions for now, Peebo Thulu wrote, wait, which native Australian religions? There were hundreds. The only one that I've heard of so far. I can't say that it does or does not, this reading frame, apply to all of them, okay? Because an Australian friend of mine read to me stories which, funny enough, he could only find in children's books about Aboriginal Australian religion. Apparently, the Aboriginal Australians do not feel that it's part of their beliefs that they have to testify to others. Incidentally, the Bible doesn't describe that for Christians. So in that way, they're the same. It does describe the necessity of testimony of, again, the intended reader, and only the intended reader. If you assume that you're supposed to be successful in testimony, you're going to feel like a failure. Is Christ successful in testimony? Yes. Is he a failure? No. Which works really well for that person and that person alone. So I can't answer except to say every religion that I have looked into, although the expressions are different because of societal differences, when I look at the overall expressions within each of the stories, the main ideas are always there. For instance, there's a story in I don't know the name of the tribe, I'm sorry, Aboriginal Australian, where a river rat steals away a female duck, reproduces with her via rape, and then she produces eggs which hatch out the duck-billed platypus. Now, we all know the duck-billed platypus is not a river rat duck mix. We all know that, but that's not the point. The point is that an innocent, beautiful female was taken by an overpowering male who left his home to do it, and creates this abomination of an offspring that doesn't seem to make any sense to any of us. That is to say, it's the story of the Nephilim. So there you go. There was a maybe 3, maybe 4 sentence interpretation, and if you read the details of the story, it actually works quite well. JG wrote, "What is evil, comma, Richard? Evil is that which is bad for the human animal. So being separated from others, that is being ostracized, that's bad. If you're separated from the one who loves you most, we could use mom or dad as an example if you have someone in your life, maybe or an uncle. Being separated from that person and having to strike out on your own via you're not of your own choice is definitely evil for you. You've lost your instructor, you've lost your adult, if that happened as a child, and that would be very, very sad. Separation from the ultimate father and mother. Yes, mother is described in the Bible, not just father. Being separated from them having the most knowledge or perfect knowledge is the worst thing you can do for yourself. Adversely, just like it is literally evil for me to try to breathe water. It is good for fish, but then I'm not a fish. So that's what evil means. Electricity isn't the right thing to do that, Peebo Thulu. Peebo Thulu, the reason that modern science has to, by necessity of logic, extrapolate things that we absolutely have no indication exist. That being dark matter and dark energy, is because the material that we can see acts in such a way that gravity cannot justify it. Now, we need 95% of existence to be dark matter in order for the gravitational model to work. However, big goose egg, we can't find something that makes up 95% of the universe. Well, take a hint, guys. It ain't gravity that's doing it. However, in structured laboratories that can do these kinds of experimentation, Birkeland current sheets through electrical transfer, which we know everything is electricity. You can break down everything to electricity. You can bombard things with electricity. They'll gain energy, whatever that means. They'll gain mass if you bombard them enough with just energy. They'll get bigger. So we know these things are made out of energy. But what if it's all energy, just like we intuitively think it is? Well, then Birkeland current sheets explain spiral universes. No assumptions necessary. So I think energy is the right thing to displace a planet, and gravity can't be the thing that's holding them in place. For instance, in the gravitational model, you can't have a heavier object moving slower at the same distance. It would be sucked into the sun. Now do the math and try to justify to me why the Earth and Jupiter stay where they are. Go ahead. That will not work in a gravitational model. Jupiter cannot be there if the Earth is where it is. And all the rest of the planets, for that matter, they don't work either. However, if they're trapped between Birkeland current sheets, you can imitate that in a lab every day of the week. No problem.
Can you repeat that? If they are trapped between what sheets?
Birkeland current sheets.
Oh, you mean like an electrical conductivity? And well, I'm not sure I understand.
If you put highly pulverized particles in a semi-vacuum, and you have an anode and cathode on each side of the vacuum, and you cause an energetic transfer from the anode to the cathode, it will automatically start pulling in dust.
Okay.
It just does that. And then if you do that long enough, they'll form little balls, and those little balls will become trapped in between what are called Birkeland current sheets, which if you imagine, I know this sounds goofy, but imagine a really short, fat unicorn horn. Okay. Yeah. Now you invert that and you twist the bottom unicorn horn in the opposite direction, right? And you make the unicorn horn of several layers. So there's a shell over a shell over a shell over a shell. This is very much how Birkeland current sheets form naturally in energetic transfer, especially in long-distance plasma discharges through semi-vacuums and vacuums. In other words, outer space. Now we can imitate this in a lab every day of the week, any day of the week. You can make what is essentially everything that would indicate it's going to form event if there was enough. If there was enough defeat, because at some point the particles won't stay suspended, and they'll precipitate out of the semi-vacuum because you're on the Earth, and it's subject to gravity. But this is a better explanation for what gravity is than anything else we see. And I think the newest science is leaning slowly, because science advances one funeral at a time, that it's leaning toward an energetic model anyway as an explanation of gravity. So to say that an energetic transfer couldn't dislodge a planet is, well, huge assumptions that don't work in reality.
Hey, can you put a link later on maybe to this subject? Because I tried to Google it and couldn't quite find it. I must be misspelling it.
You're probably overcomplicating it. Berkland.
B-E-R-K.
Land. Current. And
There
sheet
it is.
spelled like sheets on your bed. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll read that later on.
Yeah, this was actually introduced as justification for what we see in outer space before the gravitational model and Einstein. But it was dismissed because it doesn't fit some of the presumed paradigms. But if you look at the box galaxy, it has an obvious unicorn horn twisting out of the top and bottom of it in opposite directions. And you can see the layers in it.
Oh.
But that's because there's particles there that are being ionized and emitting light. If there's not enough free particles, then plasma looks like nothing.
Well, I'm not ready to overturn science just yet, but it is interesting, which is why I'm here.
Celestial billiards game. Let me get that for you real quick here, Peebo. Gonna have to go to Google Docs. And remember to right click so you don't shut yourself out of the tab. And this and that and I can't believe how much information this computer can process at one time. When I was a kid, dude, it was like, and you guys are about my age, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, they were terrible. Well, I mean, they were good for their time, but they were horrifyingly clunky. And remember when internet pages used to take forever to load?
Oh, you didn't mean David and Goliath. Okay, well, I just gave you David and Goliath, Peebo. But the name of that comet, and I'm going to say this slowly and using the military phonetic alphabet. It's a comet, first of all. You can find it on nasa.gov. Open a new tab so I don't kick myself off. I got to remind myself of that every time. I'm so silly. Anyway. And back to StreamYard. Okay, and here's the link to C, as in comet, 2017, as in the year it was found. K2, Kilo 2, that's its actual name, is K2. And the telescope that found it, PanSTARRS, PANSTARRS. That's Papa India, November, Sierra Tango, Alpha Romeo, Sierra. Man, I'm out of practice. Not that I was a radio guy anyway.
That link didn't work for me, Richard.
Which link didn't work for you?
That last one, the ssd.jpl.nasa. It just said JPL error condition, invalid string search.
Okay, well, you can look it up by name and you can find the same stuff.
That's what I'll do. That's what I did in the past. Sorry.
It's literally on my desktop, and when I hit that button, it works.
Okay.
And then I just copied the address out of it when it came up. So I don't know why it would or would not work for me, or would not work for someone else. I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Peebo. I don't know what to tell you guys why it doesn't work for you. Let me see it. Let me bring it up again and try again. Open new tab. Small party.
You are not worthy. That's why.
Definitely
make sure it copies the whole thing. Copy. That's what's in the address. SSD jplnasa.gov.
Maybe too many people are clicking it.
I doubt it.
No.
Nobody cares about this stuff.
I care.
I mean, that's is particularly interesting to me. Now, I'm going to claim something that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I promise you, either I'm the best liar ever, and I even convinced myself, or this is actually true. When I started reading, when I was given the context, started applying it to the Bible suggested things that should exist in reality that I had no idea existed in reality. And then I went and started looking for these things, and no part of the text and the indicated reading has led me to a dead end.
Right.
Everything I've looked at was fruitful. People think I've read a lot. That's not true. People think that I've studied philosophers. That's not true. People think that I've been studying science for years. That's not true. Some people accuse me of studying ancient Hebrew. That's also not true. I just looked up the things that matter to this conversation, and all of them were there. I'm not well read. In fact, I have never in my life read a book that would be considered entertainment. Let me put it better this way, that wasn't required by my basic education from high school downward. Those are the only books I ever read. I've never studied any of this stuff at all. I get nice compliments, but they're just not true. Like Dr. Joshua Bowen says of me, I think Richard spent a lot of time researching this to find a way to justify the text. I mean, it's nice, but frankly, I don't even think I'm that smart.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I could not have done that. So you guys are going to get like a close-up of my beard while I type to make sure that people can see this.
Beard cam.
Beard cam.
Shake that beard. You shake it, baby.
It's very distracting. I'm not going to be able to type while you're doing that.
Did you see something peeking out?
Okay, Mac, that was the best one of them.
What? I'm not allowed to have pets? Come on. So you keep your pets in a cage. I keep mine in my beard. I don't see why you're so, I don't know. Your social definition is highly, highly defined, and I don't see any reason why I should adopt it. Cages, beards, what's the problem? It is.
Richard.
It is actually a remarkable. Well, I'm Irish and Southern Italian, which means part Moorish. So
yeah,
there's a comb. It's
nice.
It's actually quite strong. This beard. There's a pen. Oh wait, let me see. Let's see if it'll do this. That's about an 8-ounce mouth right there. It's not a girly beard. It's really not.
Richard, thanks for welcoming my objections so openly.
I want more of them.
I know you do.
If you have another one right now, help yourself.
I appreciate that. I don't think I do. I think you clarified a lot today. So I'm sure I will.
I only think that okay, yes, there's science, and it's doing the best that it can at our stage of development, being a 0.75 Kardashev scale civilization. We're doing fine. Okay.
Right.
And our science is getting better, and there are things we don't yet know. So to us, those things are above the natural or supernatural. I'm fine with that definition of supernatural. There's things we don't know, and we can't justify them. Fine. Is there magic? Is there things that are above nature in such a way that they have characteristics such that they defeat established laws of physics? No, and there can't be. Now, there are Christian sects or persons, depending, who demand exactly that description of supernatural. The Bible does not demand it. Their dogmatic reading of the Bible demands it. I'll give a for instance of how bad this is before we wrap this up. And Zebra and I were just reviewing this before the show. This is Genesis 6:17. Now, in the King James, it reads the following. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that in the earth shall die. Okay. I like to point out that 50% of these words are not in the original text. 50% of these words are not in the original text. Now, when I did this translation, I used as few interjected words as possible and stuck I have less than 50% of the words that they used that I had to interject to make it work in English. Okay. But sticking to the actual definitions of these words, which are listed here, because the actual words mean the following: behold, if, and see. That's what look came out, look, okay? Which I mine. So a qualifier and then ownership. Come, bring. Now, come there is a qualifier to bring, meaning brought with. I come bringing. Okay? That's the etymology of the word there, where in the King James it says something like, I will cause. That's not the right idea at all. It's I'm bringing with me. Okay? And what am I bringing with me? A flowing deluge of water springs of washing. And I'm going to stretch it a little bit right here where I say I'm going to use the definition given for waters, meaning large group of beings. Okay, so that's the deluge, a large group of beings. To the firmament, that means the earth itself. And what are they? They are destroyers and spoilers and corrupters. That's what I'm bringing with me. And they are also further described as being fat-fleshed, man messengers with tidings. Well, if you know the Bible, who are the man messengers with tidings who are destroyers of the planet being fat-fleshed and are brought with God? Who is that? Behold, mine angels I brought to be a flowing deluge, washing over the firmament. This is described in Isaiah. This is described in the book of Revelation and lots of other places. Like, this is not news. If you know the whole of the work, this is not surprising whatsoever. And what do? Well, they quicken the spirit and understanding of who? These living creatures. Well, what living creatures have understanding? Who are lowly and under and flat. That they're under heaven. They are to be quickened with understanding, and they are about to die or ready to perish. Well, who's that describing? Well, mankind on the earth. This does not at all describe killing human beings voluntarily via water, but an overwashing of the planet with angels where they cover the mountains, where they're so thick, standing side by side, you can't see through them, and the mountains look white. You know? And what do they do when they're here? Well, they tell us the truth. Tell me what about that statement is either A, immoral, B, inconsistent within the text, or C, logically impossible. See, there's nothing immoral. There's nothing about killing us. That's simply not there. Now, would the ancient Hebrews in bias and in prejudice, in tribalism, want to say that we're the perfect God save and everyone else dies? Well, gosh, every group says that.
That's right.
But if you look at these actual definitions here, the actual words and their roots, it's hard to extract the Judaic, or what became the King James, out of these ideas. And that's my assertion.
Really,
it's easier to get what I'm saying than it is to get Judaism.
True.
And the only thing that I had to do that is significantly different than the actual definitions and their etymology, their root words, the only thing I had to do was go with one definition given for waters that is in the Bible itself. I don't think that's a stretch. In fact, I think that if you're given a definition for a word, you should use it wherever possible because you were given a definition for that word. Okay.
I agree.
Last thoughts, final questions, anything in the side chat? Peace and respect also to Doubting Thomas. That was you, Mac.
Yeah. Just thanks again, and everybody tune in tomorrow for the Dr. Thomason talk.
She
I think
just
that'll
set
be a
it
good
back
one.
a week.
Oh, too bad. All right.
She just set it back a week. It's going to be next Thursday, not this Thursday. Sorry.
That's all right. I'll look forward to that.
Though, that was predicted in the book of Revelations that thy meeting will be set back a week.
Oh, come on.
The light-haired one will be professed to set back.
Yes, exactly. It's all there, you know. Sorry, that was good. I'm being a real jerk, but it's who I am.
No, it's funny.
Yeah,
no,
you're awesome.
I
Steve.
love you. You're brilliant and you're hilarious.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for being part of this too, Steve. Well, then, everybody look forward to next Wednesday, and we'll all get back together again.
And
yes,
Matt, there was something that I interrupted. You went, and then you stopped because you're nice.
I don't remember. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry,
though.
Steve. Steve, there was something. You made a noise. It was Steve, not Mac. I used the wrong name.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It might be that
Steve,
noise I make when I try to impersonate the Muppet known as Beaker. It would say, meep, meep, meep.
I love Beaker.
And, he's a great Muppet. He may be the best of the Muppets, frankly.
He might be.
Do you know why the name Professor Melon is ironic?
Because the Muppet has a melon-sized head?
Well, they made him with a melon-shaped and sized head. That's true. But do you know why it's ironic?
No.
This also I found out because of the Bible, actually.
No way.
That's long. Yes. This also I found out. It's actually Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
Who fund most research around the planet.
Interesting.
Very
Isn't there a
interesting.
Carnegie Mellon University as well?
Indeed. And if you're
And
a professional teacher at like a collegiate level, like a professional teacher at a collegiate level, your only retirement plan is where you pay into a fund by Carnegie Mellon, and in order to keep your funding that you paid into, you have to denounce God.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Where do
That's
I sign up?
Well, you've already, so you're already good. You just have to become a teacher.
Okay. I'll do what I can.
That's
All right.
wild.
You know, if it's okay, Richard and Mac, I'm tuckered out, so I'm going to sign off. But it's been real.
Totally.
Peace and respect to
Thanks,
both
Steve.
of you,
Respect,
all listeners.
Thank you so
Likewise.
much for your help in these things, guys. If something occurs to you after the show, please write it down, and I will try my best to address any objection you have to this, whether it comes from being self-defeating in logic, or if you think that it's entirely too circular, or that there's an infinite regress somewhere. By the way, there's no infinite regress in the Bible. Or that you think it's too presuppositional to be logically rigorous, or you think I'm reading something poorly from within the text and I need to justify it, please write them down, bring them next week, Audience guys, people in the side chat, anyone who's listening now or in the future, please feel free to do the same. Bring your objection next week. I will address you personally as best that I can. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming. I appreciate your participation in these things. You help to sharpen me, which thing I desperately need. So thank you very much. And to everyone who showed up, which by memory was B, no, just B, Big Zebra. You had some comments, Doubting Thomas, Moon Medi, Peebo Thulu. Let's see for the rest of them. If there were others, I'm going to have to look. And AK, which name is so, it's such a abstract idea, AK as a name. I doubt I'm ever going to be able to remember that. I'm just going to call you Trophy Cup. That makes better sense for me. And thank you for showing up, Trophy Cup. All right. Until next time, guys, peace and respect to you all. I want you all to know, and I do believe that this is true, that someday it will happen. But I look forward to the day that we're all great friends.